Hey Katie, it's Dr. Scott. I have some feedback for you on your essay 2 draft, your visual analysis. Just a reminder, I'm looking for a thesis statement that's clear, that's focused, that makes a good argument about 2 flood wall murals, and has strong supporting reasons. And when I think of supporting reasons for an assignment of this length, I'm thinking about body paragraphs, that each body paragraph is providing a good base on which you're building your paper's overall argument. Also looking for supporting details, and that's details from the murals themselves, but also the reading inside of historical and the documentary that we read or that we watched. And so when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking about, okay, are you using details, but then are you also explaining how those details support your paper's overall argument? Organization and transitions. Have you organized and sequenced your paragraphs in a way that makes sense? Is there a reason why you're going from one paragraph to another? Integration of paraphrases and MLA format, using a visual in your writing, and use of a paragraph without be verbs. So that's what I'm looking for in the final draft. I think in the terms of your paper, I think you could talk a little bit about thesis statement, maybe a little bit about organization, and supporting details. So for me, the thesis statement is down here. The 1937 flood mural and the Twilight mural both showcase how truly resilient Portsmouth is through the sequencing, color schemes, and tone. One recommendation I have, and you might be able to pull off, you may not need to change the thesis statement necessarily. I do think that it's a little simplistic, that it's just kind of saying that it does this, and it's kind of assuming that both murals are equally and in the same way are trying to get across this idea of resilience. But after I read your draft a couple times, I really don't think that they're doing that, that they're accomplishing that resilience in the same way. The Twilight mural is a tough one to write about, and I'm actually kind of interested in how you've written about it. I think it works. But to say that they're both in the same way going about resilience, I don't think so. I don't buy it. So I would urge you to consider complicating that thesis statement a little bit. Are the 37 flood and the Twilight mural, are they showing resilience in the same way? Is one showing it in a different fashion than the other? I think integrating that into your thesis statement gives you something in the body paragraphs to be less repetitive. Because right now it's like you're listing a lot of detail in some of your paragraphs. In some paragraphs you could use more detail, and then at the end you're like, yep, that all equals resilience, and then you're off to the next paragraph. But I think there's something more complicated that's going on there that I don't think your thesis statement is kind of acknowledged. But I think that in your body paragraphs, I think that I'm starting to see that there's some paragraphs where you're writing about Twilight a little bit more, other paragraphs where you're writing about the 1937 flood more, and most of the time you're writing about the 37 flood mural more. I think the thesis statement should acknowledge that. I think, yeah, that they're going about this resilience idea in different ways. In terms of organization, I think having a clear reason why you're beginning with one paragraph and then going to another, that needs to happen between the draft and the revision. Right now, like you're starting with the sequence, and I'm not sure why. It didn't seem like, at least to me, it didn't seem like the sequence was the most compelling argument that you had for the resilience idea. I thought that you had more persuasive analysis later in the paper. I think the next body paragraph is probably my favorite in your paper. This didn't work out all that well for me. That's not to say that you cut it, but maybe you say that maybe this is the weakest link. Maybe the sequence is important. That's up to you. If you think it's really important, you need to add a little bit more detail and discussion to kind of explain that. One idea I had, though, when I was reading this paragraph is, like, you talk about the sequencing of the murals. Is there sequencing that's happening within the mural? So within the 37 flood mural, I think there definitely is. There's everything that's kind of on the outside, and then there's that, like, stillness on the inside that you've described later in your essay. That's a sequence as well. Like, where the eye is drawn is also a sequence. It's something that you can talk about in the 37 flood mural. It's also something that you can talk about in the Twilight mural. So something to consider. I think this paragraph is probably your most solid paragraph that you have. There's a little bit of kind of getting outside, kind of going off on a tangent. I think that this is a tangent. It's not, you're going from talking about color, tones, to kind of giving us the background on Tomlin. I would maybe urge you to, instead of talking about in the Dr. Chabity and his wife in the introduction paragraph, begin with Bessie Tomlin. Like, yeah, the murals were put together and that was a long process, but does that really help you set up the rest of your paper? I'm not so sure. So I think if you take some of this history and you leave that for the introduction, I think that you'll be in a better place when it comes to this paragraph. But I really like this paragraph. I need to, one place that I thought, one improvement that I can suggest here is that you have this structure where you list some details, and then at the end you're like, yep, that's adversity. That's us getting through adversity, where I think you need those reminders throughout the body paragraph. That needs to happen here, and I think that's an easier job in this paragraph, but we should just kind of be arriving at, oh yeah, that's resilience. That's how resilient Portsmouth is. I think we need reminders throughout the paragraph, and we need some analysis of those details and explanation of how those details are working to show resilience. I also think that there's more to be said in this last body paragraph about the Twilight mural. I think you're kind of short selling it a little bit, which I think maybe the thesis statement kind of acknowledges. Like, there's a mural that does a better job of showing resilience, or it shows resilience in a very different way. And the 37 flood mural, it goes about it in this way, and maybe the Twilight mural goes about it in a different way. But I think that the calmness, I think there's more to describe there when it comes to the Twilight mural. And it might just be that you ran out of time, and that's fine, but I think you're kind of short-selling that mural a little bit. There could be more detail, and again, there needs to be more discussion connecting it to the paper's overall argument. Did you just call it a magical work of art? Katie, this isn't a Disney. All right. Here's a quick rundown. Complicate that argument a little bit. I leave that up to you. That's your choice. Right now, it's kind of basic. The argument, like, yeah, it's resilient, but is it resilient in the same way? I think that you could complicate that a little bit. It gives you something more to write about in the body paragraph, so that you're not getting into like, yep, that's resilience, yep, that's resilience. It's like, this is the different ways that resilience is working in both these murals. Connect the details in the paragraphs to the paragraph's main point and to the paper's overall argument. This is something that has to happen. The first bullet point is something that I guess is kind of an optional for you. I'd like to see you address it. The second bullet point, you need to do that. So you need to kind of explain how your details are backing up your paper's overall point, not just arriving at it at the end of a paragraph. Use the introduction to set up the resilience idea. I think that could benefit the essay. There's that, when you're in the color paragraph, we've got that history lesson in there that's taken up 2 to 4 sentences, and it's kind of slowing down the analysis. Get that in the introduction. Remember to think about the other criteria, organization, why you're going from one paragraph to another, making sure that the paraphrases are integrated. Use an image, and address that be-verb issue. Okay, so there's lots to do, but this is a good draft. I think it's got a good structure that you can build upon. There's definitely work to be done, but I think it's a really good start, Katie. If you got any questions, let me know. Talk to you soon.